Thank you. I'm really excited to be here today and talk about designing mobility experiences for people and talk about a little bit about what we're doing at Volvo and how we go through that process and how design can help. If you could put up the slides, I'll take you through. Um, there we go. So my name is Thomas. I'm leading UX at Volvo. We've had the organization now for a year. We've come together with a number of UX professionals that were within the company, but we decided to bring them together because we felt that we can make better experiences. I've been at other companies like Facebook, Nokia, Microsoft, and I'm bringing a lot of that experience into designing new types of experiences that are happening in the automotive industry in car companies. So I'm here to talk about how the discipline of design can help the evolving world of mobility. So first we should ask, or we can ask, what is mobility? And we talked a little bit about that this morning, but the definition I use is that it's the ability to move freely and easily around. And that's a goal that we have at Volvo. But if you look at the broader sense of things, there's obviously different things that help. Of course, there's walking, but there's vehicles and boats, planes, trains, cars, there's bicycles, and other things. But when you look at what people are doing, and that's the important part when we're thinking about how we're designing these experiences, in people's daily lives, they're running errands, they're going to and from work and school, they're visiting family and friends, or they're doing short trips. And those are important needs, and that's what drives the choice of mobility service that people use. Oh, we lost our slides. And I think what's important, or the way I think about it, is the car became one of the primary methods for personal mobility. It was convenient, it was always there, and it was easy to provide mobility services for people. So if we go back and look at how that started, it obviously started with before cars had engines, and it was the horse and buggy, and that transformed. The car was invented in 1886, and then really started to become more popularized in the early 20th century. Model T, produced by Ford, was an example of a first mass manufactured car. So it was available to more people, and it was more affordable. And so technologies evolved and changed. In the 60s, cars started to look more like this. And this form factor is something that stayed for a while. And so even now, cars look similar, though they have different types of technologies, different safety regulations, and those kinds of things. And people are doing the same sorts of things with those vehicles. But what happened a few years ago is new technology started coming up with the smartphone revolution. In the 2000s, new technologies were available for the cars to really change some of those behaviors. And that's really what's transforming the industry now. I feel like now there's an intersection of a number of different future possibilities and a number of different technologies that are all coming together at one point that really starts to change what personal mobility can be and provide some of the challenges that we have as designers and as an industry. So I'll dive into these a little bit more. First is the digital and connectivity aspect. So, with smartphones and personal computing going smaller, more mobile, and faster, that is starting to appear in the car. People are bringing their phones into the car. Um, Android, Apple, other companies are making their products and services, even platforms, available in the car. Um, and so that's creating the ability for new possibilities, new types of interactions and experiences within the car. But it also brings with it potential complexity. There's with more things comes more complexity, more information being presented to the user, and that's of course a challenge when you're driving a vehicle. Cars are now connected to the internet, and through network services, and that's also bringing different types of communications and capabilities into the car. But again, more complexity, more chances of distraction. Lots of technologies around assisted and autonomous driving. These are technologies that will help people drive more safely, protect people, maybe catch mistakes that the drivers didn't have on the assistance side. And the technology is slowly evolving to provide more driving on behalf of the user. And when you can get into a vehicle and not have to pilot it, and you become more of a passenger, that changes the whole experience of the vehicle in your car. Electrification is coming into play. When we walked through that history of cars, it was all largely based on fossil fuels, and now and the infrastructure that supported fueling your car to be able to get around is now fairly ubiquitous, and people don't have to think about it. But with electrification, that infrastructure changes, and people need to learn new processes, and we need to build new infrastructure. But that technology, and I don't think we know exactly where it's going yet, provides different possibilities in terms of the forms of the product, and possibly the forms of the services and experiences that we can build into and around the vehicles. And there's a lot of external factors. Climate is one big one that we talk about, and that has an impact on mobility through the concerns that people have, and the legislation that is coming around, which affects the industry, and it affects people's buying choices and what they need in the car. That's also transforming urban spaces. A lot of cities are creating new rules and regulations for how and when certain modes of mobility can operate in the city. So some city centers are not allowing cars at certain times and those sorts of things. But urban spaces are also becoming smarter. There's lots of experiments out there with different types of technologies, data sharing, interconnected systems to make mobility smarter and more efficient. And that, of course, is going to impact the capabilities of the digital connected car, and provide potentially more complexity. Of course, it depends how we design the experiences around that. And lastly, there's a change in business models. Throughout the last 100 years, it was typically you would buy the car, maybe get a loan, and that was the way of owning the car, and you would pay for maintenance and those kinds of things. There were car rentals and those sorts and other possibilities, but that didn't change for a long time. But recently, there have been different business models that have been started. Looking to more all-inclusive, lower-risk subscriptions, which changes the demographic of and finances for people trying to get personal mobility services. Car sharing, really changing how we think about renting or borrowing a car. And then ride-hailing has become more predominant, changing the face of like taxis. But that all of those kinds of services also change how you will interact with the vehicle, what that vehicle needs to do, and potentially changes the ownership models. Um, and of course, customer expectations around uh, or what services they buy are also changing. And you hear a lot about it in urban cities that younger people are not buying cars in the same way, that they have different expectations on um, mobility, how they perform some of their daily chores and needs. So lots of changing um, influences in our society today. So there's a change of those technologies coming into the personal mobility sector. There's a change in the society, but overall the basic user needs haven't changed. People are still using mobility to go to and from work or school, to run errands, to go visit friends and family. It's just the technologies that are providing different capabilities and the needs of society to provide mobility in different ways and solve different problems. So when we think about how design and design processes can help, it's really looking at it from a human point of view and starting to understand problems. I think about design as problem solving, and understanding the new challenges that are facing the industry and people today, and how to craft that in an engaging way. So at Volvo, we talk about a process around learn, define, build, and evaluate at many points in that process. Very light framework that helps us look at small to large problems. And I'll take you through a few examples of how we can apply that to some of the problems that we have today, and talk about what that might mean in the future. And it's all about trying to understand where the problems are and solving frictions, and designing for simplicity. Because I think one of the big challenges with this point in time is you have all of these new technology capabilities coming into place that offers a lot of potential complexity. And we really need to think about, if we're designing for humans, how to simplify that in an elegant way and make it less complicated for people. So we often start off by what we call journey thinking, which is very tangible example. When you used to have a car in the past, you would get the keys, you would unlock the car, you would go and sit in the car, you would start the car, you would shift into drive, and you would go on your merry way. Nowadays, you have to check. With electrification, you might want to check the charge level. You need to go get your keys. You can approach the car. Car will unlock itself, so that's convenience. You need to unplug the car if it was charging. You need to put the cable away. There's more steps. Get in the car. Plug in your phone, because people want to be connected to their digital media when they're in the car. You start the car. Set up your directions, because people are using maps to go places nowadays. Start the radio, or you need a shift to drive and go away. And so this is a very tangible example of journey thinking about all of the different steps. And we do that because you want to understand where are there conveniences. Like in today, with a lot of today's cars, you don't need to unlock the car. There's more automated security devices. There's a convenience, but then we add frictions by having to put cables away or other things. And so it's through this kind of mapping where we can understand where there's opportunities for improving experiences, and thinking about how we can deep dive on some of those problems. And here's an example of looking at a broader journey and mapping that out. And why I think this is important is, with this intersection of all of these different technologies and societal changes, that daily journey becomes very important. And to really understand what humans need in their daily lives, what are their emotions, what's really going to impact them, this kind of mapping activity helps us stay focused on the core goals of the user, right? They need to get to work on time, or they need to go visit family and friends. How can you remove as many of those frictions as possible, so that it's a seamless journey? And then in the next phase, once we've identified where all of those challenges and frictions are, we can look for ways of simplifying. And here we can use design methods, creative workshops, brainstorming, all of those things which many of you are familiar with, to take all of the different capabilities, layer them on top of each other, and simplify them, and just keep in mind that primary goal of getting the user to the store or getting them to perform their task for the day. And when you layer on that journey thinking, now we can start, because of some of these capabilities, we can actually start to ask ourselves, where does certain information live, or where does a certain task need to be made? It used to be that it always evolved around the car, but now, because cars are connected, you can connect to your phone, you can connect to other devices in your ecosystem. And so we as designers have new tools to think about how to solve problems for people, and can we solve them in a different way, because now people can address one of those friction points before they leave home, so they can decide, maybe while they're having their morning coffee, what route they take to go to work, or where they're going to buy a thing. So when they get in their car, they don't have to worry about directions or maps. And then simplifying things. So, Volvo, we're really trying to take all of that complexity and put it into an HMI and an interface, which is how people interact with that car, but do it in a simple enough way that we're exposing only what's needed to the user at the time, so they can focus on that core experience. So simplification is really important, but it's always tying it to the core needs of the user. And of course, the design process is about iteration. So you can only get there by constantly revising your ideas, and we of course work through sketches, through iteration, through prototyping, to really refine products and services for people. And that's how you get to simplification, I think, especially when there's so many levels of possibilities and technologies and possible touch points. You need to go very broad in your ideation, and you do that in early phases in design, through sketching, through low fidelity prototyping, before you get to something that's really high fidelity. And then the last phase, trying, prototyping, evaluating. And my saying is that you can't predict how interconnected systems work, because they've all been designed separately until you plug things in and try them out. And so the more complex the system is, the more important it is to continuously try as much in real time and with real technology as possible, to really understand where some of the nuances are of the frictions, and how that's changing the human method of interaction, how that's changing human perception, that ultimately leads to people being able to perform their task. When I was at places like BlackBerry, again, very, very complex systems that were coming together to enable basic mobility. And once you put them all together, you had very unexpected behaviors in how notifications appeared, what information appeared when, et cetera, et cetera. And those are very important at that design level, to make sure that we get right. You can only do that through trying things. And so at Volvo, we build prototypes at various levels to try things out as much as we can throughout the process. And I think with this intersection of all of these new technologies and capabilities, and all of these societal changes, we need to find ways of trying these things out, um, trying out new solutions, trying out parts of ideas so that we can understand better where those friction points appear. Um, because that, you know, that process that we have, learn, define, design, is an ongoing process, and you know, you can only do so much in your journey thinking in the early stage. You have to go out and investigate in real time, and like I said, I think with the new challenges that are facing us today, it's even more important to do that. So we need to find those opportunities. Um, and gather the right kinds of information and data to support what it is that we need to do to really solve the, these problems for people in a humanistic way, and always keeping the user at the center of what our solutions will be. So, in summary, mobility is going through a major change, especially when we look at the automotive industry and some of the new technologies and societal trends that are facing us today. But the basic human needs haven't. It's just how are we going about our daily lives? What do we want to do during and leading up to those needs? You know, getting to and from work, going to visit family, and what we need to do is really understand that we need to simplify all of the complexity, um, understand where those frictions are by looking across all of the different touch points, complete journey of the user to really identify where are those points where we can make it easier for users and keep them focused on their core task. And I think that will help us, you know, make mobility services that are more seamless and easy to use, and get more traction in the world. So thank you.